You did the American Ninja course barefoot, which maybe have
Yep.
been a first,
Yeah.
I would assume
Yeah.
as well.
Apparently it was the first time they let someone. I believe there was one year where someone lost a shoe partway through a course, and so did part of the
Okay.
course,
Yeah.
barefoot or something. But it was wild. They almost didn't let me. They had to go through a pretty rigorous legal department and the R&D and the producers. The day before we filmed, after a couple months of planning, they told me that there was a good chance I wasn't going to be able to compete barefoot, even though I haven't really worn shoes for much of anything in the last 7 years, 8 years now. But they were like, well, there's a chance we're gonna have to make you wear shoes and then say, oh, we made him wear shoes, even though he doesn't wear shoes. You know what I mean? But the day before they came and the producers were all hyped and they gave me the green light and they were like, we're gonna let you do it. So yeah, it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Then you said you also do triathlons barefoot, but you also just live life barefoot.
As
And
as much as I can.
when did you originally start that? Or you said 8 years ago, but like what initially brought that on?
Yeah, so it's actually pretty ironic. Through high school and through college, I sold athletic footwear. I was like a shoe guru kind of guy.
Mm,
I was the guy who was studying, human biomechanics, but also selling people on fancy technologically advanced footwear for sports and athletics. And then being a basketball player, I was a huge sneakerhead. I had a collection of over 100 basketball shoes, and it was a big part of my identity was shoes, and like I loved it. But through
went
studying the
complete
human
opposite way
body,
on that.
right? Like I went from hard this way to the hard opposite. Like haven't worn shoes in 8 years. That's why I think it's so ironic, But I kind of through studying the body and biomechanics and just human movement, the deeper you dive into that, the more you realize that the foot is an amazing mechanism, perfectly designed for all the things we need feet for, right? And the less you use it, the weaker it gets. A lot of the footwear of today, it's designed to do what the foot should be doing. So they put the cushioning in there so that your foot and your joints don't have to do any of the cushioning. And then they put like all this fancy stability and all these fancy names of technology in there to try to sell their footwear. But really, at the end of the day, it's kind of like if you've ever had like a broken arm and you had a cast on your arm, and after a few months you take the cast off, and because the arm wasn't able to do much, you've withered away all the muscles, right? Shoes are like casts for your feet. When you walk around in them, you're letting the feet get weaker every step you take because your body isn't having to do the movements it's designed for, right? And the feet are complex. There's tons of ligaments and muscles and bones. There's so much going on in there. You know what I mean? And that's not even to mention that most shoes nowadays are not shaped like human feet, right? They're kind of this like toe box that's angled like that, but your feet are shaped like that. And so you have to deform and wedge your feet into that and then rely on the stability and the cushioning to do most of the work. And then systemically, especially for athletes, their feet are getting weaker while they're playing sports and making the rest of their legs try to get stronger. And it's a weird disparity that leads to nothing but chronic injuries and pain and weakness and a whole world of issues. So I learned that early on, but then originally being a sneakerhead, my first idea was like, okay, what's a better shoe? You know what I mean? Like I love shoes, but maybe I'll find one that's healthier for me. And this was 2008, 2009, when I was really starting to dive down this rabbit hole of trying to find healthy footwear. And I came across Vibram Five Fingers, like the toe shoes, like people call them. And they were one of the few back then that really didn't offer any cushioning support, had room for the toes to move and splay when you're walking. And so that was a lot of fun to kind of explore wearing some of those. And then I also came across Vivo Barefoot at the time, was a company, I believe, out of the UK that was making regular looking shoes that didn't have the weird toes that some people don't like the attention of, but they have minimalist, very thin, flexible soles and wide toe boxes, and they were incredible. And so I kind of spent a few years trying every healthy shoe I could find and seeing what I could do in them and push the limits of that. And then I was also trying to spend as much time as I could outside of it barefoot when I didn't need shoes. You know what I mean? But at the time I was working at a facility that required shoes. So when I was working and training in that facility, I had to wear some kind of footwear, And then my current practice, I opened in 2015, and one of the big drivers to open my own practice was so that there was no one that could tell me to wear shoes, right? And so 2015 was really when I went to probably 98% of my life barefoot, because work was really the only place that I had to, you know what I mean? And then, but you know, at that time I would still, if I went places or traveled, I would still wear some barefoot shoes or something like that. And then I just would slowly start kind of breaking myself out of the box that I was boxed into mentally of thinking you needed shoes for things. And just little by little, I would try different things barefoot and see how that went. And I just kind of progressed to a place where I just stopped wearing shoes altogether. And my wife didn't love it at first because she hated the attention when we would go into a store and people would approach me to ask or talk about it. And of course I could talk all day. So I would just, I would give them a little education on why and the benefits of barefoot and grounding and being outside. And so, yeah, but about probably the last 7-8 years, I haven't worn shoes for anything unless I absolutely have to. Like, I'm not an extremist, you know, I'm a bit of a purist, but I try to be respectful. If I'm in someone's business and they ask me to put on shoes, I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to hold up a picket, you know, picket on the front line. But so, you know, like I'll have a pair of just minimum little barefoot sandals or something in my truck if I need them. But honestly, no one ever really asks. Like maybe once in the last 5 years in shopping in stores has anyone asked me to put on shoes, you know? And it was at the checkout line and the manager was like, "Hey, next time, can you?" I was like, "Sure, yeah."
Never went back.
Never went back. No, I go back all the time, but they've never asked me again. So, but yeah, it's been pretty wild and eye opening, you know, kind of breaking the stigma and seeing some of the things that, even being a big proponent of barefoot health and stuff like that, I still kind of had this like stigma of like, you're supposed to wear shoes in some of these places. But I've looked into it in a lot of ways. The laws relating to it are muddled or not existent. You know, it's more the no shirt, no shoes, no service thing. Like, there isn't a ton of legal basis, and some stores don't even have it anymore. You know what I mean? And like, a lot of people freak out when they find out that I drive barefoot, and they're like, "Oh, isn't that illegal?" It's completely legal in all 50 states. You know what I mean? And I find it dangerous to drive in shoes because my feet can connect more efficiently to the pedals if I need them, rather than like there's a shoe that could hook or something like that, you know? But people are very boxed in with, you know, the perception and the reality. So
especially down in Florida here, a guy walking barefoot into the store is probably the least of their problems.
Dude, everyone hears about me and they're like, "Oh, of course he's a Florida man." It's so funny.
Yeah, I recently, it's probably been about 2 years now that I got barefoot pilled and have been living as barefoot as possible. You know, have barefoot shoes, which is the phase I'm in right now. I'm not barefoot out in the stores or anything like that at this point, but wearing barefoot shoes 95% of the time, and then barefoot as much as possible, just obviously around my apartment. But if I'm out, you know, just walking around or going to the beach or whatever, of course, as well. What do you do with your kids? Thinking barefoot wise.
So I've tried to raise my kids in a little bit of what I would call a unique way. I really try to raise my kids to be critical thinkers who can make their own decisions. So I teach them what I feel is healthiest and best, but I want them to question, and I want them to ask those difficult questions and never be scared to question even me or our parenting. And so with the footwear thing, we have always spent a lot of time outside barefoot, and they love it. I have one daughter who is old enough now that she's kind of getting into the whole, like, there's the fashion side of footwear, and she likes that. And, you know, so she's leaning a little bit into exploring that. And I'm on the sideline trying to show her the healthy versions that look like the stylish ones now, you know what I mean? But I let her make her own decisions for the most part. And I assume she'll go through some phases of trying some different types of footwear and inevitably someday end up back with what's optimal and healthy. But I try to not like force anything, because I don't want her to then crave to rebel when she gets older and go and end up in like high-heeled stilettos to resent her dad who always forced her to be barefoot, you know?